An army of 100,000 soldiers laid siege to the city. The defending soldiers, upon seeing this spectacle, couldn't believe their eyes and quickly alerted the city's defenders. No sooner had he left the city wall than catapults began hurling flaming projectiles at the city. This was the year 1291, and the city was Acre, the last stronghold of the Kingdom of Jerusalem. The defenders were the renowned Knights Templar, and the attacking force was the Mamluks. The two sides were vastly mismatched, with a few hundred defenders facing off against 100,000 attackers. Before the battle, the Grand Master of the Knights, Godfrey, encouraged all the knights to fight to the death. They were not only fighting for Acre but also for the Holy Grail. After the war council, the knights, clad in armor and helmets, took their positions at the second city wall. Mamluks were scaling the walls, and the first line of defense had already been breached by catapults. The knights formed ranks, raised their lances, and charged at the enemy with all their might. They carved a bloody path through the enemy ranks before retreating and charging again. Behind you! With their superior equipment and combat skills, the Templars fought valiantly, but the enemy's numbers seemed endless. Like ants swarming the city, under the cover of catapult fire, Mamluks continued to pour into the city. The Templars, outnumbered, saw their banners fall and chaos ensue. Grand Master Godfrey ordered Landry to retreat with the Holy Grail. Landry wanted to stay and fight, but Godfrey insisted that protecting the Grail was their top priority. Acre was lost, or perhaps it was doomed from the start. Landry and a few knights opened a stone sarcophagus and retrieved the Holy Grail. However, the Mamluks had already reached the docks, their rapid advance suggesting a traitor in their midst. But there was no time to worry about that at the moment. After packing the Holy Grail and the gold, everyone headed towards the dock. Landry was supposed to ensure the Grail's safety, but he heard a girl's cry for help. He ordered his men to take the Grail to the ship while he went back to rescue civilians trapped under debris. After fending off several enemies, Landry saved a father and daughter. The Templars, adhering to their code of never leaving a man behind, disembarked to support Landry. The Red Cross sails were hoisted and the ship sailed out of the dock, while Landry was still fighting on the shore. At this moment, he was completely unaware that a crossbow was aimed at him. Knight Gawain saw the danger and shielded Landry, taking an arrow to the knee. Though not fatal, the injury would leave Gawain permanently disabled given the medical standards of the time. With his comrades' cover, Landry boarded another ship. Everyone looked back at the city of Acre. At this time, the buildings in the city were collapsing and the people in the city were being captured. The Grand Master blamed himself for the city's fall, but Landry vowed to one day retake the holy city. Just then, a catapult projectile struck the ship carrying the Holy Grail, sinking it. Acre was lost, and the Grail was at the bottom of the sea. The knights could only watch in despair as their symbol of faith disappeared. 15 years later, the surviving Templars were stationed in Paris. Landry had become close with King Philip of France, teaching him swordsmanship. At this time, the two began to compete in swordsmanship again. King Philip had outstanding looks and was called a handsome man. Although he has an outstanding appearance, his swordsmanship is very ordinary, and Landry soon knocks his sword away. The two seem to be fighting, but in fact they are talking about the issue of loyalty. Because although the Templars had a branch in Paris, this unit was not under the command of the King of France, they were completely under the command of the Pope. The swordsmanship competition was eventually interrupted by William de Nogaret, the King of France's trusted minister. King Philip was forced to attend to state affairs, but he was in a foul mood. De Nogaret didn't trust the Templars' loyalty to France, as they answered only to the Pope. With the French treasury depleted and the Templars unwilling to help, de Nogaret suggested targeting the wealthy Jews. Everyone knew that the Jews were rich, but the king also knew that they would not lend him money. Obviously, de Nogaret was not talking about lending, but robbing. King Philip, seeking his people's love, rejected the idea. The Knights Templar all took a vow of abstinence, which was their discipline, but Landry's eyes were attracted by a woman. The Knights are holding a meeting, and the content of the meeting is all about the issue of lending funds. Landry didn't care about all this. As a soldier, he wanted to do something meaningful, such as improving the social status of Jews in Paris. But the Knights have a rule that no matter where they are, they cannot interfere in local affairs, which makes Landry very depressed. After the meeting, the Grand Master sought out Landry to talk. However, Landry brought up Accra, expressing his long-standing desire to return and retake the city. He didn't understand how long they had to wait after 15 years. When the team leader was explaining the situation to him, he suddenly saw an orange, and the conversation ended there. The Grand Master appointed Landry as the temporary leader and then hurriedly left the city. Not long after departing, he encountered bandits. The Grand Master charged through the encirclement on horseback, but the bandits pursued with crossbows. Soon, the Grand Master's horse was struck, and he found himself surrounded by the bandits. These were no ordinary bandits. Their leader knew the Grand Master's name, Godfrey. As swords were drawn, Godfrey found himself surrounded and struggling to fend off the attackers. When Godfrey was about to be attacked, a man saved him. He had no weapon, so he could only use a stick to fight against the bandits' axe. When the axe fell, Godfrey killed the bandit with one sword. Godfrey is badly wounded, so he lets the horse bandit leader go. With his final breath, Godfrey instructed the man to deliver his sword to Landry, a Templar knight in Paris. The man's name is Parsifal. He's an honest farmer, and he has a beautiful fiancée named Marie. Marie doesn't want him to get involved in any of this. She just wants to live her life in peace. But Parsifal doesn't listen to Marie and chooses to ride to Paris instead. Landry climbed into a window and met a woman named Joan. This woman was the one who had attracted his attention before. Now that he saw her, he couldn't take his eyes off her. There's a big deal going on in the city of Paris. A man who had been humiliating Jews for years died at a lecture, and in plain sight, his killers carried a yellow circle logo on their clothes, the very symbol of the Jews. Ethnic tensions in the city reached a boiling point. Parsifal arrived at the Templar headquarters and informed Landry of the Grand Master's death. Landry dispatched knights to retrieve the body. At this time, another murder case involving Jews was reported to Landry. King Philip prayed for this matter in the magnificent cathedral, and Minister de Nogaret proposed to send all the Jews out of the city. He said that this would calm the anger of the people in the city, otherwise, the city would be in chaos. King Philip finally agreed to the solution. De Nogaret was not so kind. He wanted the money of the Jews and asked them to withdraw from Paris just to kill them all on the way. The Jews who killed people in the square before were also hired by him. This was all his plan. Joan overheard this plot and informed Landry. As the Jews left Paris, they were ambushed in the woods by mercenaries. They were holding weapons and shields, and a massacre was about to take place. At this time, the knights came roaring, and the mercenaries on the opposite side were frightened and retreated straight away. These mercenaries were no match for the knights. A girl with a stick also fought back bravely. The mercenaries saw that the situation was hopeless and fled. The knights won. Landry thanked the girl for her bravery. The girl's father said that it was Landry who saved them in Accra before, and now Landry has saved them again. Landry arranged a place for the group of people. Meanwhile, the knights sent to retrieve the Grand Master's body found Parsifal's fiancée Marie murdered by the bandits. It was the escaped bandits who came back to take revenge on Parsifal, and a once happy family was torn apart. A junior officer in the Knights Templar discovered a sapphire in the hilt of Captain Godfrey's sword. He looked through the light and found the Holy Grail pattern, and inside it was an iris, the national flower of France. This indicated that the Holy Grail was in France. King Philip was furious when he learned of de Nogaret's plot and warned him that another transgression would result in his execution. After warning de Nogaret, King Philip and the Queen walked into the meeting room. Queen Joan was the woman who was with Landry before. Parsifal lost his beloved fiancée. He couldn't sit idly by. Every second of waiting was agony for him. He opened a door and saw nothing but gruesomely dead bodies inside. Just then, a bandit appeared behind Parsifal. The bandit told Parsifal that he no longer needed to seek revenge, as he would soon be reunited with his wife. At that critical moment, the Holy Knight Landry knocked the bandit unconscious from behind. They learned from the bandit that Godfrey's body was downstairs, but the bandit claimed not to know why they had dug up the body. Their leader was named Roland, who used a crossbow as his weapon. Marie had died from a crossbow bolt. Upon hearing this, Parsifal was enraged and punched the man unconscious. It turns out that before this, the paladin was going to bring back Godfrey's body, but when everyone arrived, they found that Godfrey's body was gone. Therefore, everyone began to look for the whereabouts of Godfrey's body. Landry felt helpless with Parsifal's impulsiveness, as they could no longer question the bandit about Roland's whereabouts, but they now knew the location of Godfrey's body. Landry came to the bottom of another building and saw several people dissecting a body. Mutilating a corpse was a grave disrespect. Suddenly, someone inside the building mentioned that Roland was upstairs. Hearing this, Parsifal immediately went to find Roland, revealing Landry's position in the process. With no choice, Landry had to engage in combat. He quickly dispatched 2 opponents, but there were still many enemies inside. The bandits began to taunt Landry, saying that his uniform hadn't seen blood in 15 years, while they, as outlaws, fought almost every day. They implied that the Templar Knights lacked combat experience. However, they didn't know that Landry was formidable. A group of bandits fought Landry to a standstill, with neither side gaining the upper hand. Upstairs, Roland was having an old priest write a letter for him, as he was illiterate. The letter stated that he had obtained the body of the knight commander and would send the item over after handling it. After the priest finished reading the letter, Roland killed him, as he was no longer useful. At that moment, an enraged Parsifal rushed to the second floor, just as Roland emerged from a room behind him. As Parsifal lunged at Roland, a bandit restrained him from behind. Roland ordered Parsifal's execution and then left.
Parsifal, isn't it?
Parsifal struggled with the bandit and eventually overpowered him. Just as Landry was fighting alone, Gawain arrived with the Holy Knights. Gawain's knee was injured, causing their formation to be easily disrupted, and he was overwhelmed. His injured leg couldn't support his body, making his sword swings weak. Once the strongest swordsman, he couldn't even defeat a single bandit. Landry had to step in and save him. Gawain was frustrated and threw his shield to the ground. When Landry reached the upstairs, he found Parsifal sitting alone and helpless in a corner, with a bandit's body lying nearby. Meanwhile, the city of Paris was bustling. Pope Boniface had arrived, and all the Christians in the city lined the streets to welcome him. He had come to Paris for 2 reasons: to preside over the farewell ceremony for Godfrey's body and to secretly search for the Holy Grail. The Holy Grail was of great significance to them. If they found it, the Templar Knights would receive a blessing, like a divine decree, helping the Crusaders to conquer the Holy City. Therefore, they greatly valued the Holy Grail. After Landry was appointed as the commander of the Paris branch of the Templar Knights, they found a key in Godfrey's body, but it didn't open any box. King Philip's daughter, Isabella, was now 12 years old and of marriageable age. 2 princes had come to propose: Prince Louis of Catalonia and Prince Edward of England. The princess favored Prince Louis because they had been exchanging letters. Isabella was moved by Louis's sweet words and gentleness and was determined to marry him. However, King Philip was troubled because England was more powerful. If his daughter married Prince Edward, it would ensure long-lasting peace between England and France. From all perspectives, it seemed best for the princess to marry Prince Edward, but Isabella was unwilling. King Philip was at a loss, and de Nogaret also favored the English prince. However, Queen Joan hoped her daughter would marry the Catalonian prince, because the queen married King Philip at the age of 12, and has always regretted not marrying for love since their marriage. Now she doesn't want her daughter to repeat her mistakes. Unable to make a decision, King Philip turned to Pope Boniface, who had arrived in Paris. The queen thought this was a good idea, but de Nogaret was unhappy. Knowing the Pope would choose Catalonia, an alliance between France and Catalonia would strengthen the Pope's influence across the continent, while England was an island across the sea. De Nogaret decided to stop the Pope and planned to send an assassin to kill him. The assassin thought the mission was dangerous, but de Nogaret offered him a lakeside villa and a monthly stipend for a year. Satisfied with the generous reward, the assassin agreed. He took advantage of the opportunity when the Pope met with believers on the street and mixed into the crowd with a dagger. The Pope was completely unaware at the moment and was still praying for the believers. In the palace, King Philip and his courtiers awaited the Pope's arrival, but he was unusually late. The queen suggested sending someone to look for him, and de Nogaret was secretly pleased. thinking his plan had succeeded. However, the next moment, the doors opened, and Pope Boniface entered. De Nogaret's assassination attempt had failed. The Pope conveyed God's will that Isabella would marry Prince Louis of Catalonia. An envoy presented gifts, and de Nogaret received one as well. When he opened the box, he found the head of the assassin he had sent. The new commander, Landry, hoped Parsifal would join the knights. Parsifal, now alone, would benefit from the support of the knights. Landry told him to think about it and then went to see his old friend Gawain. As the commander, Landry wanted Gawain to step back from the front lines because his injured leg made him unfit for battle. Landry explained that if Gawain continued to fight, he would not only burden himself but also his comrades. Landry suggested he train new recruits instead. However, Gawain didn't want to train new recruits. Once the best swordsman in the knights, his injured leg was a result of saving Landry. Gawain felt he was being treated unfairly and even regretted not letting Landry die on the docks of Accra. Landry was hurt by Gawain's words but knew he had to make tough decisions as the commander. Allowing Gawain to continue fighting would be irresponsible. Frustrated, Gawain went to a tavern. According to the rules, Templar knights were not allowed to drink in public. Just then, de Nogaret sat down next to Gawain and offered to find the best doctor to treat his leg in exchange for a favor. He revealed the Pope's true purpose in coming to Paris. Gawain didn't respond directly but raised his glass.
What do you know about the Holy Grail?